So algae, they are chlorophyll bearing, that is why they are usually green in color, and they are simple. The structure is simple. They just have a plant body which is called as the thallus. So what is isogametes? Those gametes which are similar in size, which cannot be distinguished from one another, it is called as isogametes. So from where an organism has evolved, based on that the classification was done in the phylogenetic system of classification. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to today's session on the chapter 3, that is Plant Kingdom. I'm Dr. Divya, Biology Faculty, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru, Temple of Excellence. So in the previous chapter, we had studied about Whittaker's 5 kingdom system of classification. So in detail in that particular chapter 2, biological classification, we had studied the kingdom Monera, the kingdom Protista, the kingdom Fungi, Plantae and Animalia. But Plantae and Animalia, we had just studied a little bit. But in detail, we had studied about Monera, Protista and Fungi. So earlier, we know that according to Linnaeus' system of classification, Linnaeus, he classified the plants based on only 2 categories, that is kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia. But now, after Whittaker, he rectified the mistakes and brought in the 5 kingdom system of classification. The bacteria and the fungi or the protistans, which was placed under the kingdom Plantae, were divided, were separated and placed under separate kingdoms. Even when it comes to cyanobacteria. So cyanobacteria, which is also called as the blue-green algae, earlier it was placed in the kingdom Plantae, but it doesn't have a nucleus and it is unicellular, or it doesn't have a nuclear membrane. Therefore, it was shifted, though it was called algae, though the cyanobacteria or the blue-green algae, it had the chlorophyll pigments or the chloroplast, they were still shifted kingdom Monera. So this is how the classification progressed. We have not studied in detail in the previous chapter about Plantae and Animalia. So in chapter 3, it is completely dedicated to Plantae. So we shall start studying about it. So we know that there are a lot of different systems of classification that came up. One is the artificial system of classification, which is also the Linnaeus system of classification, wherein Linnaeus, he divided the organisms into 2 kingdoms, Plantae and Animalia. Next came the natural system of classification. Here again, it is also based on the morphology. The plants and the animals are divided. Again, moving on to phylogenetic system of classification. When it comes to phylogenetic, so phylogenetic, it has something to do with the genetic, that is the evolutionary relationship between an organism. So from where an organism has evolved, based on that the classification was done in the phylogenetic system of classification. Then came the numerical system of classification or the numerical taxonomy. So the numerical taxonomy actually makes use of the computer, and nowadays this is the most advanced form of taxonomical way that is being used presently, that is the use of computers. Here the characters are mentioned in the form of numbers, like number 1 means it is the shape of the leaf, like that the characters are mentioned in the form of numbers and it is stored in the computer. It is just if you type the characters based on the number, the plant will be it will be classified under a particular group, or it will be put under a particular group based on the characters which are depicted in the form of numbers. So that is all done by the computer nowadays. So that is nothing but numerical taxonomy. Next is cytotaxonomy. So earlier I had told you the classification was done only based on the external morphology, how they look. Based on that it was divided. But nowadays even the cells are also observed. So cytotaxonomy involves the naming of an organism or the classification of an organism based on the shape, structure and the type of the cell. So that is nothing but cytotaxonomy. Next, moving on to chemotaxonomy. So sometimes there are chances wherein even the observation doesn't give us the correct result, because whatever observation we do from our naked eye, or what we see, the structural observation, the morphological observations that we do on a plant or an animal, it will not give a correct information. Some errors may happen. At that time, we can go in for chemotaxonomy. So chemotaxonomy has got something to do with the chemical. So based on the chemical compounds that are present in the plant, the classification can be done. Say for example, there are some plants which give out latex. So again, in that latex, there are different chemical compounds present in that latex. So saying that they all give latex, you cannot put it under one particular group. So that is how they do some chemical observations or biochemical studies they do on the plant, and then they decide how they can be classified based on the amount or the type of the compound, that chemical compound or the biochemical compound that is present in the plant. So that is nothing but chemotaxonomy. So with the small introduction, we shall move into the actual subject here, that is the plant kingdom. So under plant kingdom, there are different types of plants that are available, right? It is not just the angiosperms or the flowering plants that you see in gardens, and just not the flowering plants are present in the plant kingdom, but apart from that, there is the algae, we have the bryophytes, we have the pteridophytes, and the gymnosperms. One of the form of a plant or organism that comes under the kingdom Plantae, that is nothing but algae. So algae, they are chlorophyll bearing. So that is why cyanobacteria was also confused as algae, and they put it under the plant kingdom, which was actually wrong. So algae, they are chlorophyll bearing. That is why they are usually green in color, and they are simple. The structure is simple. They just have a plant body which is called as the thallus. So the plant body of algae, it is usually called as thallus or thalli. So they are chlorophyll bearing, they are very simple, and they are thalloid. So thalloid means the plant body is nothing but thallus, that is thalloid, and they are autotrophic. So autotrophic, they can synthesize their own food. How? Because chlorophyll is present. Since chlorophyll is present, they can synthesize their own food whenever exposed to sunlight. And also, when it comes to the habitat of algae, they are usually aquatic. So aquatic means they live in both freshwater and marine water. So some of the marine algae, they are edible. People use them as food. So all that we'll study in the coming slides. So here, algae, they are chlorophyll bearing, they are simple, they have a thalloid, that is their body is nothing but called as a thallus, and they are autotrophic, that is they synthesize their own food, and they are largely aquatic, wherein they can be found in fresh water, they can be found growing in fresh water and marine water, that is in seas and oceans. And when it comes to habitat in detail, the algae, they are water lovers. So wherever there is a moist condition, they will start growing there. So they grow on moist stones, on moist soil, and also on decaying and moist wood. So these are the habitat. So apart from this, some algae, they also have a symbiotic association with lichen. So in the previous chapter, I told you, while studying about lichen, we had studied lichen, they have a symbiotic association with the algae. So wherever lichen is there, below the lichen, if you just scrape off the lichen and see, you can see algae growing under that. So there are certain algae which are associated with the fungi lichen, and also they grow on animals. So there are certain algae which grow on animal. When it comes to the form and the size, so algae, they are usually colonial. They can be colonial. Colonial means they can occur in groups. They can occur in colonies. So usually colonial. The best example is volvox. So can you see here? Don't get confused. Here different volvox are present. Different volvox are there. Different. These are single organisms, but they occur in groups like this. So one single volvox, if you just observe and see, this is how it will look. So each individual volvox will form a colony. So volvox, which is the algae that usually occurs in colonies, the best example is volvox, and they can be filamentous. Best example is Ulothrix and Spirogyra, and they can grow massively. Some of the algae, they can grow huge, especially those algae which are present in the oceans and the seas. They are very huge. They have very huge body. They have massive plant bodies. The best example is the kelp. So you can see here, these are the kelps. So kelps are usually found in marine. Their habitat is marine, and they're usually found in the seas and oceans, and they have very huge algal bodies, or they have very huge thalloid. So next we have lichen. So I told you some algae grow in association with the lichen. So you can see here some algae growing in association with the lichen. Next, moving on to the Spirogyra. So Spirogyra, they are filamentous. So filamentous means they are long and slender. That is why they are filamentous, and the filaments, they have septas like this. They are septate. They have septas. So, and why it is called Spirogyra means, if you see here inside, you can see the spiral arrangement. Since there is spiral arrangement, it is called as Spirogyra. So this is Spirogyra, the best example. So algae can be huge, having huge thalloids. They can grow in association with the lichen, and their plant body can be filamentous, and they can be septate. And next, one more filamentous algae I gave you the example was Ulothrix. So Ulothrix, it is also filamentous. So it is also filamentous. So you can see filament, single filament with cells inside. And Ulothrix, they can also reproduce by fragmentation, wherein one fragment will get cut. If one fragment is cut, it will develop into a new Ulothrix. So they can grow like this, filamentous. Next is, I told you, algae, they also grow on other animals. That is sloth bear. So you can see here, algae, they are growing on the sloth bear. So algae on sloth bear. So these are the best examples of algae. So moving on to the next one important characteristics, we shall study about the reproduction. So in the exam, if they ask, write the general characteristics of algae, then whatever I had mentioned previous about the habitat, about the body structure, all that you can write. So next, moving on to reproduction. So reproduction in algae is usually of 3 types. So generally they are of 3 types, that is vegetative reproduction, asexual reproduction, and sexual reproduction. So vegetative reproduction is by fragmentation, as I had already told you, one bit. So as I told you here, one bit, if it gets cut, that bit will grow into a new organism. So that is nothing but fragmentation. So fragmentation, and next is in some algae, they reproduction is asexual, wherein they reproduce by the production of spores. What kind of spores? Zoospores. So what are these zoospores? Zoospores are the spores that are flagellated. So they are flagellated and they can move in water. So these are the zoospores. They can move in water. And since algae is found majority of the time in moist area in the water, they reproduce asexually by the production of the zoospores. So zoospores are the asexual structures here. Now, when it comes to sexual reproduction in algae, it occurs by the fusion of the 2 gametes. So, fusion of 2 gametes, and the gametes can be of different forms, that is isogamous, they can be anisogamous, and they can be oogamous depending on the species. So, what is this isogamous? So, whenever a term comes like sexual reproduction, it is always by the fusion of 2 gametes. So, isogamous, usually they are flagellated. So why are these gametes flagellated? Means because algae, they are present in the water, they have to reach each other. So flagella is the one which helps in the movement or the swimming of the algae. So that is why the gametes are usually flagellated. And the gametes are of 3 different types. In that, isogamous, they are usually flagellated. That is, they have a flagella and they are similar in size. That is why it is called as isogamous. Iso means similar. So you can see here the best example for isogamous. Can you see here gametes? So you have gametes here. So they are almost similar in size. To look, you cannot differentiate between the male gamete and the female gamete. Both the gametes are almost similar in size. That is why it is called as isogamous. That is example in the case of Eulothrix. And there are some gametes which are non-motile. That means they do not have a flagella. So some isogametes are non-flagellated, that is they do not move, they are non-motile, and they also are similar in size. So what is isogamous? Those gametes which are similar in size, which cannot be distinguished from one another, it is called as isogametes. One more best example for isogametes is the Spirogyra. So here when it comes to anisogamous, means it is the opposite of isogamous, means they are dissimilar, they do not look like the same. It is easy to differentiate between the two gametes, that is nothing but anisogamous. In anisogamous kind of sexual reproduction, two dissimilar gametes fuse with each other, that is two gametes which do not look same, they come and fuse with each other. So fusion of two gametes dissimilar in size is called as anisogamous. The best example is Eudorrhina. So next is oogamous. So oogamous, it is the fusion between one large gamete. Here also there is, you can differentiate between the two gametes, but what happens here is one is large gamete and the other gamete is smaller. So that is the difference. The best example is volvox. So in volvox, I'll show you, you can see two gametes. So you can see here one gamete and the other one. One is smaller and the other one is large. So it is easy to differentiate between the gametes. So that is called as oogamous. Isogamous, both the gametes are same. Anisogamous, both the gametes are dissimilar. When it comes to oogamous, the gametes are dissimilar, wherein one gamete will be large and the other one will be smaller. So in oogamous, a fusion will occur between one large gamete which is non-motile. So the large gamete, so the algal cell having the large gamete will be stagnant, it will be non-motile, and that smaller gamete which is motile, that is the female. So the other smaller gamete which is the male, which is motile, will move towards the female and then the fusion will take place, therefore giving rise to the new progeny. So that is what happens in oogamous. Oogamous, the fusion occurs between the stagnant or the non-motile male gamete which is large towards the non-motile male gamete. The motile female gamete which is small will move towards it and it will fuse and the reproduction will occur. Therefore, the new development of the new progeny will occur. That is nothing but oogamous, and usually they are non-flagellated. So non-flagellated, usually the male organism is non-flagellated. Why? Because they are stagnant. The best example is volvox and fucus. So we have volvox, the best example is volvox, and one more is fucus. So this is fucus. So these are the different types of gametes that are involved in the sexual reproduction. So next, moving on to the uses of algae. Algae are used nowadays for a variety of things. So apart from that, they are also ecologically important. So how it is, so we shall see. So algae usually increase the level of dissolved oxygen that is present in the surroundings. So when it increases the amount of dissolved oxygen that is present in the surrounding, especially in the pond area, it is helpful for the fishes, right? Because fishes will get enough amount of oxygen for their respiration. So it increases the level of dissolved oxygen in their immediate environment. And algae, they are the primary producers of energy which form the basis of food cycle. So algae, it is one of the important material which provides a source of food for the aquatic animals that are present in that particular habitat. So they act as a food source. And apart from this, marine algae, that is porphyra, it is called porphyra. So this porphyra, marine algae, that is porphyra, laminaria and sargassum, they are usually used as food. So algae, they are used as a food source. So they are used as food. Here also it is used as food. Usually when it comes to commercial use, they are used as food. So marine algae, porphyra, laminaria and sargassum, they are commonly used as food. And there is one more marine algae, which is marine brown algae, which is called as algin, and marine red algae, which is called as carrageen. These actually they produce some compounds called as hydrocolloids. So hydrocolloids are nothing but the water holding substances. So these hydrocolloids, they have the capability to hold water. Therefore, it can be commercially used for different purposes in the industries and all that. And next, moving on to agar. So agar is one kind of an algae out of which a powder called as agar-agar is produced. So powder called agar-agar is produced. This agar-agar, it is actually used. So different types of agar are Gelidium and Gracilaria. So out of Gelidium and Gracilaria, agar-agar is prepared. This agar-agar is actually used as a gelling agent or a solidifying agent. So you might have eaten marshmallow, jellies, then what else? So different types of things, custards. So all those things to prepare so those things, if you need to make it in a jelly-like state, then this agar-agar is actually used. So therefore, it is used in the food industry or the bakery industry and all that. And also algae, they are rich in protein. So therefore, they are used as a supplement, not just by the sports person or the athletes. They are also used as a food supplement by the space travelers. So that protein algae can be either taken in the proteinaceous form, or algae as such can be used as a food supplement by the space travelers. So these are the uses of algae. So coming to different classes of algae. So in algae, there are different classes. Again, for easy classification, they are called as Chlorophyceae. The name itself suggests Chlorophyceae. It is green in color. Then we have Phaeophyceae, and then comes the Rhodophyceae. So when it comes to classes of algae, there are different classes of algae that are present. Chlorophyceae, Phaeophyceae and Rhodophyceae. So Chlorophyceae, they are the algae that are usually green in color. So they are usually green in color, glassy green in color, and because they have abundant chlorophyll pigments, that is chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, all that is present in abundant. And when it comes to Phaeophyceae, they are nothing but the brown algae, and when it comes to Rhodophyceae, they are the red algae. So red algae usually found in the marine environment, so marine seas, oceans, etc. So in detail, in the coming class, we shall discuss about the Chlorophyceae, Phaeophyceae and Rhodophyceae. So in this session, you learnt about algae, the general characteristics of the algae, how algae reproduce, that is the different types of reproduction in algae, and also you learnt about how algae is used as a food source, how it is used in the industry, and also how it is commercially used for different purposes. Apart from that, you also studied the usefulness of algae in the ecosystem, wherein it will increase the level of dissolved oxygen in the particular habitat where it is growing, and also it serves as a food source for the aquatic animals where it is growing. So in the next class, we shall discuss about the different classes of algae. So I hope you understood this session well. We shall meet in the next coming session. Thank you.